All right, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the one and only Wrestling Otaku channel. Of course, your personification of excellence on YouTube and YWC, where the best reviews wrestling, and your three-time YWC channel of the year. And I'm back here. It is, of course, Wednesday, October the 8th, 2025. Now, ordinarily, it would be Wednesday. You know what that means, but AEW Dynamite does not come on tonight. It was on last night as we had a special Tuesday edition of Dynamite entitled Title Tuesday, which I saw last night. So, pretty solid edition of Dynamite as they return to their roots. They return to Daly's place in Jacksonville. Fun show. I may give a little recap, a little bit later here on the channel, but here today I want to talk about something else. It pertains to wrestling, and that is the news of the viewership numbers for SmackDown once again, because once again, SmackDown on USA has hit an all-time low, a new all-time low for their viewership number, and a big all-time low in terms of the overall rating for the 18 to 49. So last week's edition of SmackDown, Friday's edition of SmackDown on USA, pulled in 1.03 million viewers. That is the lowest number in the show's history, the lowest number since returning to USA, and the lowest number since 2023 when they moved to FS1 for a week. And so it's the lowest number for a non-preemptive episode of SmackDown, for a live edition of SmackDown on a Friday on USA in the show's history. And of course, a couple weeks ago, if you guys remember, I did a video on the channel talking about SmackDown's previous all-time low from about a month, like I said, a month or two ago. I think like mid-August or July, I believe. It was somewhere in there. I'd have to go back and look. The video's still up here on the channel, but their previous all-time low was 1.1 something million. Now they basically dropped below that, and they were just shy of dropping below a million viewers for the first time in the show's history for a live episode of SmackDown. And also they drew a 0.25, I believe, a 0.25 in the 18 to 49 demographic rating. That is their lowest that they've ever pulled in the show's history since that episode. Since the previous number or the previous time that they moved from to FS1 for whatever reason. But anyway, so SmackDown hits yet another all-time low, and well, there you go. That's basically the state of WWE. Now, before I continue, I want to clarify something, because I know there's going to be people in the comments all talking about, oh, well, you didn't bring up this and that, and oh, here you go again talking shit, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, what about AEW's number, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing, folks. I know all about the report with the Nielsen ratings. I know that, I've seen the reports. I watched the videos from F4W and other sites. They got this new system, or this new metric, or this new... Basically, there's a new method in which Nielsen records the ratings for these posts the ratings for these TV shows and so on and so forth. And it has been adversely affecting pro wrestling. It has adversely been affecting the viewership and the ratings for pro wrestling shows for like the last 2 weeks, ever since they implemented it. And that's for WWE shows and AEW. That any pro wrestling show on cable will be adversely affected by this number, will be adversely affected by the change in the Nielsen ratings. That being SmackDown, NXT, and the AEW shows, of course, Dynamite and Collision. And you've seen it in the viewership numbers that have been noticeably dropping as of late. And so this has basically taken place for the last two weeks. But the reason why I bring up SmackDown's number is because even with the change, last week SmackDown got 1.2 or something like that, which is still a low number. It's the bar is steadily getting lower and lower with the show. But now they've once again hit an all-time low. They've dropped nearly 20 or 30% in the viewership from the previous week. They dropped 200,000. They've almost, like I said, almost just barely avoided dropping under a million viewers for SmackDown, and that is pretty astonishing. And again, I know you're gonna say, well, SmackDown, what about AEW Dynamite got 465,000 viewers last week? Here's the thing, folks. There's a big difference between SmackDown getting a low number and AEW getting a low number, okay? With AEW, number one, that's not their actual number, because the Nielsen rating doesn't account for HBO Max on streaming, so you have to factor that in too. The AEW not only airs on cable, but they're also air on HBO Max every week for Dynamite and Collision, so you have to, when you factor that in, the number is way higher than what it appears to be with the Nielsen rating. So that's number one. Number two, The reason why AEW has such a fluctuating number, they get anywhere from around, 500 to 600, thousand viewers every week on cable. Sometimes more than that, sometimes less than that, depending on what's going on. Right now, you got the MLB playoffs, and that'll adversely affect the number two for all wrestling shows. Baseball, you got the baseball MLB playoffs going on right now. That'll, again, and you got Dynamite changing nights, and stuff like that, and changing time slots for Collision, and that's adversely going to affect the number, and that's going to adversely affect the number no matter what show it is. But the thing about it is, the difference between SmackDown getting a low number and AEW getting a low number is AEW is a fairly new show, a fairly new company. It's only been around 6 years. And they've had a tremendous amount of criticism, a tremendous amount of basically vitriol from people who are longtime WWE fans. And you basically had a story early this year, actually, a few weeks ago or a month ago, where WWE is basically admitting to the fact that they are going out of their way. They're going to try to go out of their way to put this company out of business, to try to take them off TV, or try to, basically put them down before their next before the next contract, before their TV deal with WBD expires, before their next contract renewal for the TV deal and shit like that. That's the reason why you've had WWE go out of the way to have shows head to head with certain AEW shows, with AEW pay-per-views. Now, the last time that happened, WWE fucking looked stupid, and it majorly backfired in their face the last couple times. And so obviously they're not going to pull that anymore. I think WWE right now has bigger issues to worry about, like the fact that their parent company TKO is $3 billion in debt. But yeah, I don't think WWE is going to risk hurting their public image anymore. You don't hear anything now about WWE counter promoting or counter programming AEW shows. Wrestle Dream is still taking place on October 18th. We haven't heard any announcement of WWE creating a pay-per-view out from scratch, or creating some random show or putting some random NXT show or whatever on the same day. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that WWE, for the time being anyway, is done hindering AEW because they got enough egg on the face as it is. But again, getting back to my point, the difference between AEW Dynamite getting a low number and SmackDown getting a low number is AEW is a fairly new show, and they have to deal with competition, and on top of that, WWE and their partners and affiliates attempting to hinder them, attempting to stunt their growth, and that results. And what do you think happens when they attempt to do that? Their viewership is going to be wonky. Their viewership is not going to be consistent because WWE is trying to mess their shit up. I would not be surprised if WWE did some shady deals behind the scenes to try to fuck with AEW's Nielsen ratings and viewership numbers and shit like that. Hell, you remember a couple years ago, there was that report that WWE basically paid off the Fast Nationals to, post AEW Dynamite's viewership like early, and it was like a low number before, the actual number came out. That was back in 2020, 2021. This was during the period where Dynamite and NXT were going head to head on Wednesday, and of course Dynamite still fucking destroyed NXT to the point where they moved to Tuesday. But it's like AEW has a shit ton of competition. They got all the stuff against them, and they're still performing at a high level, creatively and with what they're doing at their shows on most weeks. Whereas with WWE, they've been around for years, largely unopposed. They had, WCW went out of business, ECW went out of business, TNA and Ring of Honor are no factors, and so on and so forth. They've went all this time largely unopposed, and now you look at them and they're a shell of their former selves. You got people coming out talking about how bad the product is on a week-to-week basis. They're regularly getting low viewership numbers for NXT on USA, even though they literally just moved there, late last year this time, earlier this year. And it's like, they moved back to SmackDown, SmackDown moved back to USA, and they're getting ungodly low numbers. They've gotten all-time lows twice within the last couple months now. It's like, you see the viewership dropping off, and it's like it's dropping off at an alarming rate, and it has been for the last 10 years. And it's people want to make excuses for it, and there's really nothing. You really can't blame anything other than WWE's ineptitude to create compelling storylines and characters and shows. And it's like the reason why WWE's numbers are as low as they are and they continue to drop and they continue to dwindle is because the fans are losing interest in the product. Nobody wants to sit around and watch something that, nobody wants to sit around and watch and invest in something that is ultimately not going to get any better. You know, WWE has made it clear they don't care about the fans. They don't care about what the fans want or are invested in. They don't care. All they care about is getting as much money as they can. That's why you see the fucking ticket prices for these shows skyrocketing to ridiculous number, to ridiculous. To ridiculous points. You know, the ticket prices for these shows are fucking ridiculous. Or Saturday night's main event, in December, they got tickets on sale for that, and John Cena's, it's advertised as John Cena's, retirement match or his final match, and fucking front row tickets for that show are reportedly like upwards of $11,000 for front row seats, or, first couple row seats. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Nobody wants to pay these goddamn ticket prices for fucking the WWE show. I don't care if it's Saturday night's main event. I don't care if it's a fucking Cena's last match. Hell, even WrestleMania fucking charging as much as they do. They could somewhat get away with it with WrestleMania because that's the biggest show of their year and shit. Their Super Bowl. But charging fucking 40, 50K, 70K for fucking WrestleMania tickets is fucking ridiculous. You could buy used cars for that amount of money. And it's like regular, ordinary, working class citizens, a vast majority of WWE's fan base, at least in terms of their viewing audience for SmackDown or whatever, can't afford these fucking prices. And it's like, the TKO and the people who run WWE are basically, justifying it by saying, oh, well, the demand is high. The demand is high. They're fucking, your viewership is tanking. The attendance for these shows are going down like it's gone down, like steadily gone down the last year or so. So how can you justify this? Because of TKO's new dynamic pricing and all that bullshit. And I heard that report too. Their dynamic pricing model and all that kind of shit. And it's like the reason why they're charging fucking these ridiculous prices is because these WWE fans are fucking going to these shows and paying these ridiculous ass prices. When people stop doing that, then they're going to stop fucking charging that shit because they can't. They're not going to be able to because nobody's going to these fucking shows because people can't afford that shit. They're trying to price gouge their own fans. They're trying to price out, the people who can't afford these shows. They only want the fucking rich and wealthy. They only want the fucking upper middle class people to fucking attend their shows. And it's like, there's only a select number of people who are going to do that. There's only a select number of people who are going to fucking pay these ridiculous prices for these shows. And it's like, it's getting ridiculous to this point. And it reflects all the stuff that is going on with WWE right now. The lack of creative, the lackluster shows, the poor execution, of their weekly shows or the weekly TV, the poor execution of the pay-per-views, and just all the stuff, combined. The lack of storylines, the lack of compelling storylines, the lack of, quality, fresh matches. All of it attributes to WWE's viewership numbers going down, and that's why the SmackDown numbers are steadily going down. I would not be surprised if by the end of this year we see a new all-time low of SmackDown dipping under 1 million. I would not be surprised by that. I know a lot of people think that's not going to at the beginning of this year. I'm sure people would have never thought that SmackDown on USA I'm sure they'll never even dream of SmackDown on USA dipping under 1 million. But we're very close to that happening. I think it is going to happen by the end of this year. If not, then surely next year. Because it is getting to that point. WWE is seriously in danger of losing a vast majority of their audience. And chances are, from the looks of things, they don't really care. The people in charge, TKO, don't care. And it's what it is. So there's a big difference between SmackDown getting a low number and AEW Dynamite getting a low number. So people need to understand the difference. Okay, and this is not me fucking being biased. This is just me giving my true opinion and an informed opinion based on what I'm seeing. So SmackDown hits a new all-time low, 1.03 million viewers, and it's likely going to continue with this new Nielsen rating model and the fact that WWE is just not good right now. So it is what it is. You can say what you want. You can try and, twist the narrative and, try to defend it any way you want. But the fact is, until WWE improves, it's going to continue to go down. And so, it is what it is. So that's pretty much it for that. So that's all I had to say in regards to this. So I just had to kind of go through that. So SmackDown's viewership is tanking, NXT's viewership is tanking, and likely they're going to continue to as long as WWE is in the stale spot that it's in. So, but anyway, that's all I got to say for that. So go ahead and give me your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Appreciate all the support I can get. And with that being said, it's pretty much going to do it. So thank you for watching. Till next time, Wrestling Otaku. I'm out. See you guys later. Peace.